All right, hey guys, how you doing? Hey, this is Kevin. Hey, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. By that, let me explain. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that are built into the app so you can record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And then next, Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you. So it can be heard, for instance, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything that you're going to need to make a sound, solid, quality podcast all in one place. And then, don't forget, go to your app store, download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Take care. Hey, welcome listeners. Welcome to another segment of Joining Souls Community, Life Changers. Today I just want to share with you just quickly as we get set up to jump in and dive into what we have for today. I want to share with you what Joining Souls Community and Life Changers is all about. In the Bible, in the book, the very first book of the Bible of Genesis, chapter 2 and verse 7, there is a scripture that goes like this. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and the man became a living being. That, my friends, in the Latin is what's referred to as imago Dei, in the image of God. Okay. Now that scripture, the reason why this scripture is so critical to absorb and understand, it's not necessarily just from a Christian standpoint per se, to say that this, to insinuate that this platform is only for Christians, because it's not. The premise of Joining Souls is the fact that God made each and every one of us as human beings and formed us from the dust of the ground, as it says here. And in that, because of that creation by God, we join as a community. And the way that we further and continue to grow that community is to go out in that said community, wherever we may be, and to change lives. Henceforth, the name Life Changers. All right, friends. So as you're listening, be reminded the following platforms where you'll find this podcast, Joining Souls Community, Life Changers. You'll find it on this application called Anchor, in which this is published and distributed through Anchor. Find it there. You'll find it on Spotify. You'll find this on Castbox, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public. As well, just a reminder, on Facebook, you'll find the Joining Souls Community page, in which you're more than welcome to put your comments, questions, anything that you may have. Also look for a link. There's going to be links within that to send you straight into the podcast itself. Now remember, in order for that link to work, your device has to have whatever platform that you're looking to go into to listen to this podcast. You have to have that particular application downloaded to your device in order to listen. Okay, so whatever that platform is, it has to be the application has to be downloaded to your device. All right. So also just a reminder with that as well, talked about Facebook. You can also get on Instagram, Twitter. You can also get on LinkedIn. You can get on TikTok. Also Snapchat. You'll find links at different times there. So be on the lookout in one of those. Okay. And as you're listening, as I mentioned, also don't forget to subscribe. As you subscribe, of course, you're aware of that. You'll get the notifications when a new episode has been recorded and added. So friends, I look forward to you joining, whether it's a devotion or an honored guest. Enjoy this podcast. May you be blessed. May your life be changed and impacted as a result. God bless. Hello.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Lois, how are you?
I'm perfect now.
All right. So, yes, we finally got through. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, of course, of course. The tech monster is always around.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, listen, we'll go ahead and get started. How are things sounding on your end? Is everything sound
I'm perfect as well as you're perfect.
okay? Good deal. Good deal.
And,
You
and
sound
I, yeah, and I'm really excited. If we have a second, I'm
mhm.
really excited to speak with you because
Yes.
shame guilt is affects our emotions and our mind, but
Mhm.
seriously, it affects our spiritual well-being more than anything. And
Yes.
that's why emotional psychiatry doesn't work because it's really a spiritual effect upon us.
Mm. That's interesting. Listeners, we're going to go ahead. Lois and I are we're both jumping at the bit to go ahead and get started. So we're if with your permission, Lois, we'll go ahead and get started.
I'm
Um,
here. Good. Let's go.
Listeners, we have a wonderful segment here planned, and Lois is going to share with us a bit here, some insight on shame and guilt, which I would venture to say just about all of us deal with it or have dealt with it in some way, shape, or form in our lives. But today we're gonna dive into different facets of shame and guilt. And Lois, again, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and listeners. As we go ahead and get started, just for some background, Lois, just share if you would with us just a little bit about just your background, maybe where you come
Okay.
from, family.
I'm I'm 77,
Hmm.
so I'll be brief
Oh,
because we could spend a few hours, as you well could understand.
yeah.
I I I've had a interesting life. I
Hmm.
had an extremely abusive childhood, which I was not aware of until my middle ages. You know how it goes when you're 50 and 60, you kind of reap the rewards or the damages that you incurred during your childhood and adolescence.
Right.
And this was very true for me.
Okay.
However, I do remember I was very dyslexic and I had Erin syndrome. Most of you may not know about this. I didn't
No.
either.
What's
But
that?
that is when you pick up a book to read, the words keep moving.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And today, now they are aware of this syndrome, and that's usually due to um, physical head traumas.
Wow.
And so they use different colored glasses to help this situation out. Anyway, so
Mm-hmm.
I had tremendous traumas to my brain, and that was evidenced by the dyslexia and the eardrum and not being able to read, etc. However, I
Mm-hmm.
excelled beyond the normal, and I was very interested in tap dancing. I drove
Okay.
my parents crazy to tap dance, and I tap danced from like 5 or 6 years old till college. And
Okay.
I do believe that was the left brain working. I was able to work through that with the help of
Mm-hmm.
God, of course, to
Yeah.
balance it and be able to read. I'm still dyslexic, but not near what I used to be. I can read and do things like that. And I also
Okay.
was admitted into the University of Pennsylvania College, which, as you
Very
know,
nice.
is a Ivy League school. So I, man, I'm smart.
Yeah.
I had dyslexia and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't take tests. And that was in the 40s and 50s, and they didn't talk about those things then. So that was my life. However, I just kept on moving. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I had in my 50s and 60s, through therapy, it's a long story, but anyway, I all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
remembered that I had a near death experience. And that was somewhere
Mm.
around 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And now I know why I was able to overcome all these obstacles, physical obstacles, because spirit was really giving me the energy that my body could not give me.
Mm. Okay.
So, anyway, I felt much better. I wasn't suicidal anymore. That's a step up.
Mm-hmm.
However, I still
Mm-hmm.
had depression, anxiety, and so forth, of the shame and guilt, like we all do. But I had I had it very deep because of the extreme abuse that I incurred during my lifetime.
Mm.
Someone said, Lois, what do you do about shame? And that's an interesting word. Never
Right.
thought about it. And that's really funny because here I was covered with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, I did investigating. I have a detective mind. And
Mm-hmm.
through the grace of God, again, I was able to find out information that wasn't currently in the marketplace. And I
Okay.
was seeing clients at that time because I was helping myself through interpersonal. Um, People know about talking to the inner parts of you, the good parts, the bad parts, the uh, Sally and George and all these parts of yourself that you're
Right.
not schizophrenic. We all have parts of themselves. That's another
Right.
story. But I was
Mm-hmm.
helping people with that. And then I saw the shame and guilt actually affecting all these inner parts of ourselves. And I went, whoa, that's how we can get rid of shame and guilt. It's
Mm.
actually inside the inside of us. It's inside the inside of us. So
Okay.
that's why it's hard to find. But once you find it, shame, guilt only has one defect.
Mm-hmm.
It dissolves in detection. How about
Mm.
that? Isn't
It's
that
all.
wonderful to know? So that's
Yeah.
why I'm speaking. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm speaking because it's fixable.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to find it, and that's why I call myself an educator because we're not educating this. I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
knows this? We don't know
Right.
this. They kept it a secret. Shh, can't
Right.
talk about that.
Right.
So I'm loud and clear.
Okay.
Shame guilt is dissolved in detection.
Okay.
So that started. I was so excited because I didn't have to go to therapy for depression or anxiety or
Mm-hmm.
unhappiness or whatever. I just had to
Right.
get rid of shame guilt.
Okay.
And but nobody would let me talk about it 10 years ago
Right.
because we don't talk about it, right?
Mm. Now you said
Mm.
they wouldn't let you talk. Are you talking,
I'm
Lois?
like a speaker. I'm a good speaker. And they said, Lois, you're a great speaker. Can you talk? And they said,
Mm-hmm.
what is your topic? I said, shame, guilt. They
Mm-hmm.
said, no, we don't talk about that. Can you talk about joy, happiness, and love? And I said, of course I can.
Right.
But you're not going to have joy, happiness, and love unless you get rid of the shame and guilt.
This-
Oh, we don't talk about that because we don't have that. And I went,
Ah.
well, that's the current theme of the world,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
getting more accessible now because the virus thing has turned everything upside down and people are more isolated within themselves and they're coming to front with their emotions. And this is
Mm-hmm.
why, I'm asked to talk on podcasts now. So if I
Mm-hmm.
may cut my story of my life a little shorter to explain why I call it shame guilt and not shame and guilt.
Sure.
Is that
Sure.
okay?
That is.
Okay.
Please.
Because it was a horrendous life, but I was dying at 50 and 77, I'm thriving. So what was your
Oh.
story? I'm story I got rid of shame and guilt. And
Okay.
that's my story, and it's wonderful. Now, the
Wow.
reason I call it shame guilt is because we are told culturally wise, and we're talking about Africa and the Netherlands and Greece and every place that
Mm.
has shame guilt. We're not the
Yes.
only country.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
shame is in the unconscious mind and guilt's in the conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we're told shame is bad, but guilt's good because we need it to be moral. And I'm sure
Mm.
everyone, if you're not feeling that or told that, you feel it. Oh, I got to have guilt because I need to be moral. I need to do penance. I need to repent. Well, we do need to repent for what we've done, whatever, but we don't have to have that as the main focus of our life
Right.
because that leads right down the suffering hole of not good enough. And that good enough goes into shame and it goes like, I'm not good enough. And then you don't even pray because you don't even feel like you're good enough to talk to God.
Mm.
So, um, as a nurse for like most 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that there are certain ways that the medical field categorizes things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you have a bacteria in your brain, they call it meningitis.
Yes.
If you have a bacteria in your stomach, they call it gastritis, but it's the same bacteria. If you have the same bacteria in your lungs, they call it pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the same bacteria in your liver, they call it hepatitis. So, do you see where I'm going with this? It doesn't matter. So, it kind of makes you think that they're all very different, but they're the same because the root cause is that bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
but they call it different names. So, since shame is in the unconscious mind and guilt's in the conscious mind, they call it different names.
Hmm. Okay. That's
So
it.
that makes us, yeah, that makes us go like, well, one's good and one's bad. Well, I'm saying they're both the same. So there's no healthy poison here.
Mm-hmm.
To say that there's healthy shame or good guilt is the biggest oxymoron there is.
Yeah. That's wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Very, very.
Yeah. So we have love come to us. We all know that, don't we? We can feel it. What do we feel? We feel God. We feel happiness. We feel joy. I can walk up that mountain, right? We got the love feeling, right?
Right.
We all know that one. Well, we also got the negative one coming in. The negative energy. I didn't say emotion. I
Mm-hmm.
said the negative energy coming into us is called shame guilt. Now, what happens when a negative energy, aka virus, comes into your computer?
Mm-hmm.
Oh Lordy. Oh Lordy.
It attacks your heart. Well,
Yeah, it goes Microsoft Office doesn't work and whatever you got on it and the what programs you can't save anything or it does save, you don't know.
right.
So that's what I'm saying to you, that the
Mm-hmm.
negative energy, shame, guilt comes into our bodies, okay? Comes into our system. It turns our compassion emotion into depression. It causes
Mm.
our intuition to anxiety. It turns our passion into anger. It switches our positive emotions into negative ones.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
That that's pretty interesting. That's
Now,
wow.
now I'm not the only one that has said that emotions are dual, positive and negative. But there's only
Mm-hmm.
one person who is not alive anymore, and she did incredible work years ago. But I knew this before she did, but I didn't research. But I was interested to find that someone else was saying something like I was saying. And Molecules of Emotions is another book out there, but they don't say it the way I say it because they
Mm-hmm.
don't have the input of shame guilt. So what I'm done is I put it all together
Mm-hmm.
and said that we only have to work with shame guilt. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to work with depression. Okay, there's certain ways that you can be happy and there's certain steps to take. I'm not saying that's not good. I'm just saying to
Right.
actually heal from
Mm-hmm.
depression and
Mm-hmm.
anxiety
Right.
is to rid ourselves of shame guilt. Now, why is shame guilt so important for us?
Yeah. Okay.
Shame
Tell us.
shame shame guilt is a black energy. Okay,
Mm.
what does light love energy do to us? I mean, I I have the gift of sight,
Mm-hmm.
of inner
Oh,
sight. I can see things, and that's why I'm
mm-hmm.
doing the film. I'm good because I'm making shame guilt visible
Right.
because I can see what it is. God gave
Mm-hmm.
me that gift, and that just is what it is. You don't go
Mm-hmm.
to school for that stuff. So we can see love, and we can see how the saints and all had the aura of light.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing unusual for us to see that.
Right.
But shame guilt is a black energy. It's actually black.
Mm-hmm.
And think of a black blanket that covers your golden white light.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm. Okay.
See, if you take off the black blanket of negative energy, You have
Mhm.
spirit.
Right.
You have more God in you.
Hmm.
So that's why I say that shame guilt is an assault on our emotions and our minds and our physical body too.
Hmm.
But it's also a big assault on our spiritual well-being because
Right.
it covers our ability to have a God connection.
Hmm. Now, what about now, Lois? What about? I'm thinking of conversations that I've had in the past with different folks out there. They're not necessarily considered. They don't consider themselves necessarily spiritual people or of a faith, Christian or anything like that. What do you say to folks that especially you're talking shame guilt? Because I'm hearing some things here. Talking shame guilt. You were talking about the black blanket and then the white. As far as, and I'm thinking, of course, light and darkness is a Christian. As
Hmm.
far and I draw those contrasts. What what do you think your conversation you probably have had conversations with maybe someone who's not in the faith, a Christian, or doesn't hold tech, making references and connections to spirituality and faith. What would be your if I were coming to you like, okay, Lois, I'm dealing with this shame guilt. How can I deal with this? I'm not necessarily a faith person. I'm not a spiritual person. How what would be your approach?
Sure, that's three-quarters of my work.
Hello, Lois, Lois.
I'm here. Oh my
Okay. you know, I guess we'll consider that just kind of a mini break in there. I'll be able to I'll be able to edit that
Okay,
there for us.
that's a great question too.
Yes, yes. So tell we were talking about as far as relaying this message of shame and guilt to say the non-religious unbeliever, whatever, however we want to phrase it, a person that's not in the faith. How would you what would be your approach?
Well, the people that have approached me have mainly been in therapy or various courses and different other therapies like talk therapy and tapping. And, there's a million things out there now, which are all needed, but
Mm-hmm.
they only get to like second base or third base. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
baseball fan, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
bring you home. Like you feel better, but you're like, well, I'm really okay. But you know, that
Mm-hmm.
was an interesting experience, but it didn't bring me all the way to my heart where I'm actually feel like I'm functioning and I'm still think I'm running up the hill.
Right.
So I'm saying to people that you are correct. You will never ever get rid of guilt. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you this, you will never get rid of guilt from your life if you don't get rid of and release the shame that's fueling it.
Mm.
Shame makes guilt.
Shame make us feel. Okay. Okay.
So if you keep on doing all these exercises and releasing shame and, I mean, excuse me, releasing guilt on the conscious level with your mind, that's all it's going to do. And the next day it's returning.
Mm. Mm.
It
That's
will return. And then people feel more guilty and more shameful because
mm-hmm.
they did all these exercises, paid $10,000 for a course, and spent years in therapy thinking that, oh my goodness, I am really that terrible. I can't even get rid of the shame guilt. Okay, they feel a little better, but they still don't feel whole.
Mm-hmm.
And 100% of the people I speak with are the same. So it isn't, this really needs to be spoken out because people isolate this and they don't tell people that, oh, I took this course and don't really feel any better.
Right.
And
Right.
I did this exercise for 2 years and I don't feel any better. I mean, I feel happy, but the next day I wake up feeling worse. The reason you feel worse is because the shame in your unconscious keeps growing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you wake up in the morning, you feel guilty.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
So there's no such thing as shame and guilt. It's shame guilt. It's just that our culture labels it as two diverse conditions, and
Hmm.
that makes people confused. I mean, I
Right.
get confused. But if you
Right.
put them together and say, if you cook the dough batter, you're going to make cookies.
Mm.
It's a process. If you have shame
Right.
in your unconscious, you're going to have guilt in your conscious mind. It's
Mm.
just a logical thread of information.
Right.
Now, that's not in the public domain. That's the way it works. And it's so important for people to link shame and guilt together. There's no such thing as healthy shame. There's no such thing as healthy guilt.
Right.
If I wanted to do this podcast with you, Kevin, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say, well, I'd feel guilty if I let Kevin down and didn't do the podcast, or I let someone else down because I really needed to do that. No, I'm doing this podcast with you, Kevin, because I want to.
Yeah.
It's my passion. It's my
Yeah.
job. I want to do it. So I'm asking people, can you just raise your consciousness up a little bit and act more as that's what I want to do and that's
Mm-hmm.
what feels right to do rather than I doing it out of guilt and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
See, we have to leave guilt and suffering down by the wayside. We can't be
Mm-hmm.
motivated by guilt and suffering anymore. That's a low way to live our beautiful humanness.
Right. Right. So, with that being said, Lois, now, uh, I have background, and it sounds like you have background too as well in psychology and counseling. Now, of
Hmm.
course, you're familiar with some of the DBT, as far as like cognitive behavioral therapy. So, your response or guidance to that individual is maybe seeking to overcome the shaming guilt through the means of pop psychology, for instance, versus digging into more of a spiritual
Well, I
aspect
would,
as far
yeah,
as spiritual.
for your show, we can say spiritual. I say I can, I'm an emotional spiritual counselor. You know,
Okay.
you can't separate them.
Right.
But I don't have to say spiritual. It's just I'm so happy to talk with someone who has a spiritual connection, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't preclude me from talking about shame guilt because it's emotional. And people that have illnesses and cancer and things of
Mm-hmm.
that nature, if I help them with the shame guilt release, it makes their
Mm-hmm.
health improve.
Makes
People
sense. That
improve
makes sense.
because what did I say about the shame guilt energy coming into our bodies? Now, how it
Mm-hmm.
distorts our computer. Well, if I'm not an acupuncturist or one that particular discipline, but we all know we have energy lines within our bodies. you know,
Right.
meridians and ley lines on Earth, but they correspond to our meridians within our bodies. And
Uh-huh.
what happens when an electrical pole lines get infracted with a lightning strike? It goes down. It gets
Mm-hmm.
distorted. We're the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. We're electrical body. There's a lot of books called out the electrical body. And we are electrical.
Mm-hmm.
So when energy of a negative force comes into us, our liver doesn't receive the same instructions. It distorts. What does distort mean? It means it doesn't work at 100%
Mm-hmm.
efficiency. You know, now shame
Mm-hmm.
guilt would affect an organ that's would be not be, would not be your perfect organ. We all have organs within inside of us. Some are more healthier than others. So the least healthiest organ is affected. That's just the way it is. And
Mm.
so the shame guilt would affect that, or
Right.
like somebody that has lung problems would probably, have more of a lung experience than a stomach experience. Everyone's
Hmm.
different. It doesn't matter, but
Right.
the energy of shame guilt distorts our organs. So we have physical problems. Our livers don't work as well.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
you still have to take your herbs and do medical things, but if you do the shame
Right.
guilt as well in conjunction with, you're going to heal.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
call shame guilt information that I'm giving out the key to all modalities. It isn't like um, it's only for one, it's for all of our modalities, for our physical health, for our
Right.
emotional health. Now,
Hmm.
I have worked with people
Hmm.
for 10, 15 years now, and this is in a
Hmm.
personal experience, but also other people have come back, like a year later or something and say, "Hey, Lois, you know what? I got smarter." And I said, "I did too." Shame, guilt
Hmm.
affects our brain cells as well. Our brain cells are the most delicate cells in our body.
Hmm.
So the brain is more affected physically than any other organ in our body with a distortion. That's why we
Right.
get negative behavior.
Mm. Mm.
It
Okay.
just
Okay.
it's just very logical. You don't have to be a scientist to understand this. It's
Okay.
you know God made it
Hmm.
simple.
Yes, he did.
So
Yes, he did.
um people that have the shame guilt covering their part of their brain, once they release that negative energy, it doesn't destroy the cells, it covers the
Hmm.
cells.
Okay.
So we don't have access to them. Once you release the black blanket of shame, you have
Hmm.
more of your brain cells operating. So what
Hmm.
happens if you have more of your brain cells operating? You get kind of smarter.
Right. So this, Lois, as far as, because I can definitely think of the follow-up question to that now as you're sharing this, and it's like you said, it all makes logical sense what you're talking about as far as the connection here between the shame, guilt, your emotions, and physical health. What in your we've talked about uh, as far as exposing it, if you will, exposing the shame and guilt. Now, through exposure and acknowledgement, then what next? I mean,
Okay.
is it right to put is it right some type of um what's the word I'm looking for? I wouldn't say formulaic, but some type of approach to get through it, to have victory, if you will, over it.
You can have victory over it.
Hmm.
That's what, if we can do anything today, we can tell
Hmm.
people that it's not a human condition. It's a cultural condition. It's not part of
Mm.
humanity.
Okay.
Human, so when you start feeling shame, guilt, of course,
Hmm.
you can say, okay, shame, guilt does not belong to me. Shame, guilt is not ours to own or to give. And you can write that down. People can write that down. And I have it on my
Hmm.
website and everything. Shame, guilt, just put it on the side. Okay, it's not going to go away, but at least you don't own it. Never say my shame.
Mm.
People say,
Mm.
oh, my shame. I go, no, you don't own it. Shame, guilt is not to be
Gotcha.
owned by
So not you're saying
humanity.
not
Never say
because
my
if you
shame.
and let me make sure if you're claiming that then you're adhering to that.
Exactly.
Is that
That's huge. Yes. So that's huge. I mean, if
mm-hmm,
you just do
mm-hmm,
that, that's huge. Don't say, oh, it's such a shame that it's raining today. I can't go out on the picnic. No, it's not a shame. It's sad. It's unfortunate, or it's, ridiculous, whatever you want to say, but it's not a shame. We use shame in our vocabulary. I know, I
mm,
know. I was
mm,
talking to a
mm.
host
Okay.
last week and I said it was a shame. And went, oh my goodness. I mean, and I've been doing
Mm-hmm,
this for 10 years, so we have a long way to go. But we need to
mm-hmm.
we need to help each other. Say, oh no, don't do that. So we're
Right.
all in this boat together. So
Mm-hmm,
if
mm-hmm,
people can just realize shame guilt is not part of our humanity, it's been placed upon us. It's a long story, but just know it's not
mm-hmm,
part of our biology. It's a common problem, not a biological problem. It's not
mm-hmm.
part of our DNA.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
Wave
So
surface. Okay. So
yeah.
that's
So
first.
now.
First, you have to think that way. I'm turning your head, making you think a different way. So
Mm-hmm,
therefore, since it's so enculturated in us, we have to learn what shame guilt behavior is because we feel it's normal behavior, even
mm,
though we feel bad about it. So um, that's why I call myself an educator, because I'm educating people what shame guilt behavior is. And a lot of people know what it is, they just didn't name it. I'm giving names to things. So when you name something, you can realize what the problem is. It's not
mm-hmm,
some airy fairy thing. And I have an ebook on my website. It's called
mm-hmm,
500 Questions, One Answer. And I give 500 ways that shame guilt is placed upon us in different conversations.
mm.
And it's a free book. So
Okay.
that's the
What's the
first
name?
thing to do. 500 questions, have one answer. And it's
Five
right on
hundred.
my questions equals one answer. Have one answer, excuse me.
Okay. Okay.
And it's on my website. You just click the button, sign up for the news. It's a newsletter because I give it in 20 segments because you can't get
Okay.
500 questions right away. That's
Right.
too much.
Right.
So you have to have it in a newsletter form.
Mm-hmm,
So that's the first step is to educate your. How do you find your enemy? How do you defeat your enemy? You
mm-hmm.
defeat your enemy by knowing your enemy. So that's what
Right.
you
Right.
have to do first. You have to know your enemy, teach it.
Mm-hmm,
Then I help people, and I have a DVD on this on my YouTube channel, how to talk to
mm-hmm,
the inner parts of yourself.
mm,
And you can see and feel how when you were 10 years old, you didn't get the date you wanted to, and you felt shamed. And you still carry that shame, but it's an energy and it's physical inside of you, and you can release it when you see it. And that's how I guide
mm,
people. And
mm,
this is really self healing. I teach self healing,
mm-hmm.
but I have to teach you how to do it, and then you're
Right.
good to go. So I teach people how to do this, and it's not complicated. It's just a way of teaching yourself how to heal yourself. It's called self healing. And that you do forever because
Mm-hmm,
we just always get into shame. So then, once you know what shame guilt is, how to release it, and then since you're very smart now, you know how to avoid it. When someone throws a shame guilt comment and like a bullying technique, or you do it to yourself, like procrastination and all sorts
mm-hmm,
of narcissistic things that happen that you like people will say to you, that that you're just too sensitive for that. That's really not a good way to be, or that's all shaming, criticizing you.
mm-hmm.
Um, you just say that's interesting and walk away. You don't accept it.
Right. Right.
And when people
Ah.
fight with each other, like you did this and you did that
Mm-hmm.
and then you did that, it's like an endless game. So how do you stop the game? It's like a tennis game. If you keep trying to defend yourself, you're going to keep on getting another answer, and then you keep throwing the ball back and forth. But if you don't, you just say, well, that's interesting, and walk away. You don't continue the shame guilt game.
Mm.
That's how you stop arguments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You just have to stop the shame going back and forth. One showing shame on one, and they're throwing the other one. Well, you did this, and you're stupid, and you're dumb, you're idiot. Well, you're doing crazy. No, no, no. You know how that goes. I mean, we've all been in those
Right. Right.
situations.
Mm-hmm.
But you just stop it. Say, that's interesting. And what comment can you have after that? There's nothing to say. You just say, that's interesting. You don't have to
Right.
say, I agree with you. You say, that's interesting. Can we talk about another subject?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's what I teach. I teach people how to communicate in a non-shameful way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Okay.
like a little kid came home from school and said, "Oh, Mom, I'm so sad. My friend's cat died." And we always play with it after school. And, we're both very sad about it. And the mother says,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, it's only a cat. Just do your homework. And I got to cook right now for dinner." And she walks away.
Mm-hmm.
That's neglect. Okay, the kid's got to do homework and mom's got to cook, but the mother could say, "Oh, hun, I really feel, yeah, that's true. And Bixie, the cat, was really a sweet animal, and I know you'll, you know, miss him, but we'll do something else. Let's do something else special tonight for that. And why don't you do your homework now while I'm cooking dinner?" Do you see how you could handle that a
Right.
little differently?
Right.
That's
Right.
all. It's not a big deal. It's being
Hmm.
conscious of acknowledging other people's feelings.
Okay. So now, Lois, tell him you talked and spoke about your ebook. Now, how many books do you have out currently?
Well, one, two, three. I have three
Mm-hmm.
um, books. My film is coming out in May. I'm Good Film. That should be
I saw
very good.
I saw that on social media on your Facebook page. There, I was looking at that. It looks pretty interesting. Um,
Yeah, I'm making shame guilt visible.
yes, yes. Wow. Well,
Why not?
I like
Right?
that. Well, you mentioned earlier, as far as facing some resistance, I guess, if you will, as far as speaking about it. And I think you're right. It's for most folks to be that vulnerable regarding shame and guilt certainly is not. You're absolutely right, though. It's not one of those things that people really want to really talk about. It's quite interesting. And in our world, we deal with a lot. There's lots of shame and guilt all around.
and,
Um,
and it makes victims. You're not an empowered
yeah.
person. Talk about emotional. A leader is
Mhm.
not a victim, and we need leaders at this crisis in our life. Wow, we need
Right.
people to stand up and be a leader. Victimhood
Hmm.
is shame based. They're so
Hmm. Hmm.
victimized they can't stand up for their what they need to say. I'm not being political. I'm just saying that we all need leaders,
Right.
no matter where we are.
Oh,
And I have
true.
and vulnerability is an interesting word. And the reason if I can
Hmm.
mention that for a while, because some
Yeah.
people use that and say, oh, we need to be more vulnerable.
Hmm.
Being vulnerable without shame, guilt, knowledge is stupid.
Hmm. How so?
Well, if I'm vulnerable, I've been vulnerable for 50 years and I've been insulted because
Hmm.
I'm really a sensitive person. And a lot of people
Hmm.
are. And I didn't know how to react to people that would shame me.
Hmm.
They would say this and that. Oh, you're too sensitive, Lois. Lighten up, or get stronger. You're just too sensitive, and
Hmm.
that's a shaming remark. And I would always become victimized by it because it was shaming to me. But now I say,
Mm-hmm.
they say, "Oh, Lois, you're so sensitive." I said, "Oh, thank you so much for the compliment. It makes me feel really good and be a great writer." Do you see the
Yes.
difference?
Yeah, I do.
So without, and so when I found out about shame guilt, I was the happiest person around because I was like, I don't have to be hurt anymore. I don't have to be hurt anymore. I don't, and that's what makes
Mm-hmm.
victims. Victims are
Mm.
made by being hurt all the time. But if you know how to say those words, like, oh, they're just throwing shame on me. Oh, I don't
Mm-hmm.
accept it. Goodbye. It's a totally
Yeah.
different experience.
Mm-hmm.
So so vulnerability without shame, guilt, knowledge is really stupid. Why would you be vulnerable? Like, would you go to um, a soldier? Would a soldier go to war without a gun or a
Mm-hmm.
protection? What do you call these vests?
Yeah,
Why
right.
would
Yeah,
you be
right.
vulnerable? Vulnerability has its point, but don't say you should be all vulnerable because I would not go to a beach in this hot sun in a bathing suit without
Mm-hmm.
putting some suntan lotion on. Why be
Right.
vulnerable?
Right.
Did you see where I'm going with this?
I do. I do. Okay.
And I'm not the only
Definitely.
one that's speaking out about that because vulnerability is good, but you better have some protection. Why, like a rose has thorns, a
Mm-hmm.
snake has poison.
Mm-hmm.
Every animal, every organism has a protection.
Mm-hmm.
And our
Mm-hmm.
human protection is the knowledge of shame, guilt. So you don't have to be victimized.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
that's like a whole podcast.
Wow. So you tell us something, Lois. How, in terms of shame and guilt, kind of looking around us, we spoke about what's happening in our world, as in particular, shame and guilt. What, in your opinion, your thoughts? What about, as far as what's going on? I saw um, in your profile, you talked a little bit about racism and hatred on the rise, being on the rise. How, in terms of thinking of shame and guilt, I mean, do you see any relation to that, as far as how we as a people, how we're dealing with all these things, that racism, hatred, and
Okay. Well,
uh,
all negative emotions are sourced by shame, guilt. Now, if everyone could take a piece of paper and pencil out, not if you're driving, but if
right.
you could just write this
Mm-hmm.
down, and this is in my book. If
Mm-hmm.
you can draw a square and put hurt,
Mm-hmm.
hurt, hurt emotion, just put hurt. On
Mm-hmm.
top of that, if you can build another block that's a little bigger and draw and
Mm-hmm.
put in it an anxiety,
Hmm.
and then draw another block bigger on top of that. It's an upside down pyramid. Okay. Draw another
Right.
block bigger and put anger in it.
Actually
Okay.
doing this.
Well, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I want you to. And then another block on top of that, even bigger,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
put hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And then put another block on top of that one, bigger, and put fear in
Mm-hmm.
that.
Fear.
Okay. So remember how we said that shame, guilt is the same thing, only it's in different locations and what we call it different names?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hurt, you got hurt because somebody took your lollipop when you were two. Okay. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, but you keep the shame, guilt, right? Because you didn't know how to get rid of it. because that's what we do. We
Mm-hmm.
just stockpile it. Shame, guilt is accumulative. So we get anxious, like you get another lollipop. Oh, I hope nobody takes it from me. So you get the anxiety emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone does get you upset and takes something from you, or your book bag or your books or something. And then you get angry because excuse me, uh, you get some words you use that you're not really happy.
Right.
And you get
Mm-hmm.
angry. And then, if someone keeps beating you up and you can't fight them because you're vulnerable and you don't know how to fight,
Mm-hmm.
you get angry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the anger intensifies because you got more shame guilt. The
Mm-hmm.
more shame guilt, the different names that people have given emotions, but it's just more shame guilt that's piled onto you. And then you get
Mm-hmm.
hatred because you like hate the world for having wronged you. And I've been there. I hated the world because I
Mm-hmm.
was wronged. And then on
Mm-hmm.
top of that is the big one, fear. Fear is shame. Isn't that interesting? Fear is such a profound emotion. It's double the shame of any emotion we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't obey me, God's going to punish you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We all got that one,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay. Okay.
So I'm saying to you that I believe that the shame has increased in our world because of all our crises and living at home and what I did do and what I didn't do, what I should do. And, we could go on forever. But the shame
Right.
has become more exposed and intensified because we're so
Mm-hmm.
upset, we're so angry. But it's just like an accumulation of shame, guilt buildup within our personality. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you diffuse racism? How do you diffuse fear? How do you
Right.
diffuse anxiety? You work on the shame guilt that's hidden within inside of you. It's the same thing. It's not rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we've done is diffused all of psychology today, and in what, a half an hour? You're good,
Right.
Kevin.
No, that was you. I'm just here just asking a few questions. um that's I like this model that you gave me. I really like models. That I'm gonna have to, with your permission, I do. I don't know if I share with you. I actually, my background is in professional counseling, so I counsel couples specifically, marriage, as far as marriage counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and I this model that you just shared with me is definitely something that I could see myself integrating into, um,
So,
because of course, as you know, in relationships, obviously, shame and guilt is,
and everything
as
is
you
everything
is
is
there.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Also, if I may give a
Mm-hmm.
tidbit for people listening, if you
Mm-hmm.
feel shame, excuse me, if you feel fear, we
Mm-hmm.
all feel it at some point in the
Right.
day. Just say, "Oh, that's shame. Shame doesn't belong to me." You can diffuse the fear. Don't be propelled to do things out of fear. Sit back and say, "That's shame. They're shaming me to do that."
Mm-hmm.
Or shaming me. It's shame. Fear is shame. And if you start labeling fear as shame, then you can get out of the fear mode.
Mm.
And this is also for um, people that are really in depression. Then suicide is so high, and I'm so concerned about that. Um,
Yes.
we all need people that are in that situation really need to have like a shame guilt buddy. I have
Mm-hmm.
that a lot with people. Like if you and I would be like shame guilt buddies, and I would call you on stuff, or you would call me
Mm-hmm.
on stuff, and that way you have
Mm-hmm.
somebody to talk to, because it's not easy, like you said, to talk about it. But
Mm-hmm.
if you have a buddy that's talking about it, and he talks about it, and you talk about it, then you got somebody to talk about it with. And I have
Right.
a Facebook group now. It's called the Shame Guilt Stoppers,
Shame guilt stoppers. Okay.
and
Okay.
that's all we talk about is shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's no problem there.
That is awesome. So Lois, tell me, now we talked about Facebook. What what other social media outlets are you on? Other social media outlets that my listeners can access?
Well, they can access my what do you call it, the YouTube channel, and really get
You.
the 500 questions, because that's a world of information that you never, put together, and that will serve you
Right.
well. The the
Right.
the ebook. Get the ebook
Okay.
and the YouTube channel, and join the Shame Guilt Stoppers. I give lectures every
Okay.
week.
Okay. Okay.
It's
All right.
That's a lot of fun. I love the Shame Guilt Stoppers. We're going to get T-shirts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Shame Guilt
Okay.
Stopper. What are you?
Shame guilt. I like that. I like that. Um. Wow. Well. Well, Lois, I've definitely learned some things here today, and I certainly appreciate that. And I hope my listeners, again, as you said, you mentioned taking notes. I'm a note taker, so I was feverishly writing as you were speaking at different points. But um, yeah, I really I support what you're doing as far as exposing that shame guilt and really talking about that. And the name of your movie again
Is
is
I'm good,
I'm
and it
Good.
will be
I'm
on
Good.
the internet. I will. I'll have it on my website. So just stay tuned to my website, and you'll get it.
Mm. And you said that releases in May.
Probably in May.
Okay.
It's kind of cool. I'm so excited about it. And
Wow. That
I mean, who made a movie about 45 minutes on shame guilt? Nobody I know.
I don't know. Yeah, I was about to say I don't know anyone. I think it's Lois. I believe it's definitely something. As you speak about shame guilt, it's funny as we're sitting here speaking about it. I know specifically just from my experience, in particular in the world itself, but then getting into sub cultures within our overall culture. For example, like the church community. I know that shame guilt is something. It's not in particular in church, is really not really, definitely really not talked about. And
Well, they
I
use
find
it
that
though, but they use it that, and I'm not talking about one specific religion. It's our culture.
right.
We're made to
Mm-hmm.
feel that way, and so just if people could realize that shame guilt is an effective controlling tool.
Mm,
Write
mm,
that down. Shame guilt is an effective controlling tool.
mm-hmm.
Do you know? And then if people are interested, I can validate this. South Africa with the
Mm,
apartheid the
mm-hmm.
whole country was taken down by the use of shame and guilt.
Right, right.
Okay. Now, if it can take
Mm-hmm.
down a whole country, what do you think it's doing to you?
Mm, mm,
Wow. Go
mm.
to sleep on that one.
Wow. Yeah,
So
that's
I got a
wow.
lot of work to do.
Mm, mm, wow. Well, listen, I we've that actually with our first segment, which I think it ran about 16 minutes, and what we're currently doing definitely puts us right at an hour. Um, I tell you what, Lois, I generally like to, with your permission, to leave an open door as far as my guests to come back on to return, and especially in particular would like to have you back on we could definitely coordinate this here soon to have you back on to once your movie releases, and then we
That
can.
would be great.
I'd
That
like to
would be
pick your
good.
brain on, especially get again just to get my listeners reminded that it is out and that they can access it and watch it and view it and learn. Um, so yeah, I would definitely like to have you back on to talk more about that once it releases. Um,
I would
so now,
graciously accept.
all right, all right. Now, do you just as we're wrapping up, Lois? Do you do as far as with shame and guilt? Now, do you do any like online things like you talk about YouTube as far as like webinars and things like that as well?
No, I don't, because it's more of an individual um, process in a way. It isn't like it's a course. I can't write a course out
Okay,
for this. I can give you an outline. Learn,
gotcha.
release, avoid.
Mm.
That's it.
Uh,
But there's nuances. You got to know it. I've in my all my years of experience, not one person's been the same. Everybody has the same theme, but it's in different ways.
mm-hmm,
That's why the book has funny 500 questions, one answer. I mean,
mm,
how creative are we? But I do individual sessions through Skype right now. It used to be individual, but right now it's Skype or Zoom or
mm-hmm,
whatever we can do by phone or
right.
cell. I've been in Australia, Netherlands, and Africa, and UK. I give sessions around the world, China. So
Very nice.
that's easy. And also
Okay.
now with my new Facebook group. It's only a
Mm-hmm.
week old, so it's a baby. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning. So
Okay.
you can always
All right.
join that and you don't have to be public. You can just listen to other
Okay.
people and then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, figure it out for yourself kind of thing. So if that was a new person who was like, well, maybe she's got something to say I'd like to hear, just join the group, Facebook group,
Mm-hmm.
Shame Guilt Stoppers. And it's no
All right.
charge. Just join it and be a backseat person and listen. And then I do
Okay.
groups counseling and I do individual counseling. And then I do
Okay.
emails a lot. People can write to me and I email them back. So that's how I'm available.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well,
That's
that's
pretty good.
outstanding. All right. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, Lois, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we go ahead and sign off?
Well, I'm just grateful for this opportunity because it has to be, God gave me a job and I'm doing it. And I need your help to do it. I can't do this myself.
All right. Well, it's my pleasure. I think I'm in certainly in agreement with you. One of our greatest tools, I think, for all of us, along the lines of learning, is awareness, and in growing in the knowledge of those different areas and things in life that all face, shame and guilt in particular, and knowing how to confront that. And
Yeah.
so certainly, yeah, vital.
Yeah, and it was
Mhm.
important about the vulnerability thing because people say, "Oh, I got to be vulnerable," but watch out because you can be a V, another victim. Victim vulnerability.
Mm,
you
mhm.
don't go to war without a gun, and you don't go vulnerability
Yes,
unless you know shame guilt because you'll be hurt every time.
right,
That's it.
right, right.
Okay. Bless you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Lois, so much again, and I will get you as soon as we get uh, by tomorrow. I'll have everything as far as edited and nice cleaned up copy for you, and I'll get that first to you before it actually goes out to the podcast
Okay, and I
platforms.
can
All
post
right.
on my website. I'll post it on my
Yes,
site
yes,
and
please, yeah,
everything
please
else.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All righty.
Bless you. Adios.
All right. God bless you too.
Bye.
Take care.